Okay, for this quote-unquote quiz, we're going to do the quick and dirty version and just give you a lot of the answers and maybe a little bit of the geometrical setup. Okay, but you're going to have to do all the algebra on your own and check to make sure that you got the questions right, on your own. So here we have a central angle, and this is the intercepted arc, so you should know that these two things are equal. So you set them equal, you do the algebra, we get x equals 12. Okay, the second one here, this 124 is a distractor. It's not important to our thing. We are not talking about interior angles. You need to recognize this line as being a diameter. So this whole entire half of the circle is 180 degrees. And if this much of our circle is 22 degrees, then 180 minus 22 is 158. So the angle 2x is equal to a 158 degree arc, and when you divide by 2, x comes out to be 79. Okay, number 3. Once again, we recognize, hopefully, that we have a diameter, so this whole thing is a 180 degree arc, which means from K to Y is going to be 72 degrees. And this angle where we find x is an inscribed angle. And hopefully you know the inscribed angle is half of the arc. So half of 72 is 36. Okay, number 4. Once again, this is a central angle. So we set these two things equal. You solve for x, and we get x is 26. Okay, number 5. Here is one of the harder problems on this because it requires you to do a lot of thinking, which you don't like to do. Okay, so we have to call this y because we have two different types of problems. First, we have an exterior angle problem. That says 32 degrees equals half of the large arc, which I've named y, minus the small arc, which I've named x. Well, I guess the problem named it x. But in any case, whenever we're doing an exterior angle, it is the larger arc minus the little arc. So we have to figure out what our larger arc needs to be, right? We cannot have two variables in your problem. Okay? So here's where your brain needs to turn on and think about some other true relationships. Okay, so the other relationship here is between the arcs of your circle. If I took my arc that is x degrees, and I added it to my arc that is y degrees, and I added it to the rest of my arc, which is 120 degrees, all of those arcs should add up to 360. So I have two variables and two equations. If I want to replace y over here, in my exterior angle problem, I need to solve for y over here. And it turns out when I do that, when I subtract the 120 and the x from both sides, y becomes 240 minus x. Okay, this is the important part of the problem because now I can put 240 minus x into my angle equation, and I can solve this equation for x. Okay, so we'll work through the algebra a little bit here in case you are uncomfortable with it. We'll multiply both sides by 2. And this is 240 minus 2 x's. Here's 1 minus x, there's another minus x, therefore it is a total of minus 2 x's. Okay, so when you subtract the 240 from both sides, and then you divide by negative 2, we get an x angle of 88 degrees, or x equals 88, right? That's the measure of this arc. Okay, so this is a very important idea in algebra, and it's so important that we have another one just like it up here as number 6. Okay, so the exterior angle, 62, is equal to 1/2 of the large arc, which is x, minus the small arc, which we don't have a value for, so we're going to call it y. And just like our last problem, we need to come up with another relationship between the arcs so that we can solve for y and replace, because you can only have one variable in your equation. So hopefully this one is not an issue. xy equals 360 minus x. So we're going to put that into our equation. Right? That gets replaced right here, and everything else stays the same. So there's a minus and then an x, and then we still have the 1/2 equals 62. Okay, and now we do our algebra. We multiply both sides by 2, which I believe is 124, equals x minus 360 plus x. I am subtracting the 360, and I am also subtracting the negative x. And minus a minus is a plus. So we'll add 360 to this side, because it's a subtraction problem right there. 484 equals 2x. So 1x is 242. Okay? So in these problems where you're only given one of the two things that you need to create a second relationship based upon your arcs so you can solve and substitute. It's a very important mathematical idea. Okay, number 7, find the shaded area, which means I need to use the shaded area's arc. And since it all adds up to 360, my shaded area has an arc of 360. So sector area over pi r squared equals central angle over 360. This is the proportion that we get. Okay, we should cross multiply. Okay, and when we cross multiply and divide, we get a shaded area of 24.976 square inches. Okay, so you have to use the angle of the area you're trying to find. Okay, so similarly for here, we have the shaded area. So when we do our formula, we're going to figure out what the shaded area arc is. So 144 pi over pi r squared, because this is your radius, of course, equals x over 360. Okay, now of course the pi's can cancel. That makes it kind of easy. And when you solve for x, we get 264.5 degrees. So that's the measure of the shaded area's arc. We weren't asked for the shaded area. We were asked for this. So when we do 360 minus the shaded area, we come up with an arc for GH of 95.5 degrees. Okay? When you're using this formula, you are using the information that you're given. So if we have the shaded areas formula, we find the shaded area's angle. You need to make sure that you are solving for what you're asked to solve for. Okay, number 9, sector area 25 pi, that goes on top. Pi times your radius squared equals x over 360. This one's straightforward. When you solve for x, we figure out exactly what we need to have. Okay, so remember, we are cross multiplying and we are dividing in your calculator. And the last one, we have ourselves an inscribed angle. And if you remember, the arc that it is subtended is equal to 2 times the measure of the angle. Okay, this arc from L to R is twice the measure of the angle LZR. Okay, so arc equals 2 times the angle. That's what the geometry says. And the math comes out to say x equals 9. We're also asked to find the measure of the arc. So we plug x back in there, and we get an arc measure of 136 degrees. Okay, so especially study numbers 5 and 6. They will be on your test, and we will use ideas like that moving forward also. Hopefully this helps and you are less confused than you were 10 minutes ago.